Have you ever noticed that there are people who are incredibly disciplined, determined, methodical, but who still continue to live frustrated, invisible lives empty of fulfillment? People who read all the right books, follow all the routines, do everything as it should be done, but they don't move, they don't expand, they don't flourish. There's a silent pain there, a pain that no one sees, but that is present in every sigh that carries frustration. And it is in this pain that faith enters, not as a religion, not as a dogma, but as a frequency, an energy, an inner science that decides the course of our experiences, even before any action takes place. What we call faith, Napoleon Hill, named as the true catalyst for success. Faith is the basis of every miracle and of every healing that occurs through the laws of nature, he wrote. And when we talk about the laws of nature, we are talking about something as real as magnetism, as gravity. Faith, for Hill, is an exact force, a mental chemistry, a pattern of thought that creates, that shapes, that manifests. But this faith is not born of effort. It is born of coherence. It is the vibration of being internally aligned with a future that cannot yet be seen, but that can already be felt. It is already believed in. It is already lived in silence, inside. Andrew Carnegie, the billionaire who inspired Hill, carried this faith, an irrational, almost absurd confidence, which always came before the results. He did not wait for the evidence to appear. He did not need the world to confirm his vision. His faith was already the confirmation. And that changes everything. Because when your mind behaves as if it were already real, the field around you begins to respond. Not by magic, but by tuning in. This is how mental physics works. And this is how reality bends to those who vibrate with conviction. Many people confuse hope with faith. Hope is passive. It waits for something to change. Faith is active. It acts with the certainty that something has already changed. And when this certainty is combined with emotion, a creative force is born that no method, no matter how advanced, can replace. Faith is what transforms technique into results. It is the invisible link between desire and achievement. Without it, even the best plans fall apart. Without it, discipline becomes torture. Because acting without believing is like running in the dark without direction. The body gets tired, the soul is exhausted, and nothing happens. There is a detail that few realize. The absence of true faith is usually disguised as logic, as excessive planning, as a constant search for guarantees. But what is behind this is fear. Fear of believing without seeing, fear of assuming a vision without proof. And so, many failures happen, not due to a lack of effort, but due to a lack of vibrational conviction. It is a type of invisible failure, the failure of those who do everything, except truly feel that it is possible. And it is at this point that faith reveals itself as a flashpoint, like the subtle fire that ignites empires. It is what separates those who merely act from those who transform, because faith is this, a bridge between the invisible of intention and the concrete of disciplined action. Those who understand this bridge learn to live from the inside out. They learn to trust before seeing, to vibrate before touching, to feel before conquering. And that is why in this video, we will walk together on an inner journey, a journey of rediscovering this living, applied, vibrant faith. Faith as the science of success, as mental strength, as silent energy that reprograms reality. Because deep down, we are all searching for the same thing, a reason to continue, a meaning to persist, a sign that it is worth trusting. And this sign does not come from outside. It is born when you stop doubting, when you decide to live with faith. What are you manifesting when you silently doubt yourself? Maybe you are doing everything right, at least from an external point of view. You plan, you execute, you study, you work hard. But somewhere very subtle inside you, there is a layer of doubt, an almost imperceptible vibration that whispers that maybe it won't work, that maybe you are not capable, that maybe it is not the right time yet. This doubt is subtle, but it is powerful. It camouflages itself as rationality. It wears the cloak of prudence. But deep down, it is fear. Fear of committing to something that does not yet have form. Fear of surrendering before seeing. Fear of believing and being disappointed. And the universe hears this vibration, because it is not what you think that manifests. It is what you feel deeply. It is what vibrates without you saying a word. Silent faith creates invisible movement, but doubt disguised as logic creates delays, freezes, repetitions. You may be visualizing what you want every day, but if deep down you doubt that it is for you, the energy field does not respond fluidly. It hesitates. It freezes because it obeys the frequency, not the conscious intention. There is a profound difference between talking about faith and truly living with faith. Faith is not shouting. It is not effort. Faith is a serenity that does not ask for proof. It is an internal tranquility that does not negotiate with fear. It is a state of already living inside what has not yet arrived on the outside. When you doubt yourself, even in silence, you are creating a vibrational signature that moves away from what you want to attract. You are planting a reality with seeds of insecurity, and these seeds, sooner or later, germinate. Silent doubt has a specific weight. It lives in small gestures, in procrastination, in comparing yourself with others, in the fear of showing yourself, in the fear of investing, in waiting for a sign that comes from outside, validating something that can only be validated from within. When you feel like you need more guarantees to act, more security to believe, maybe what you're missing is not knowledge, strategy, or time. Maybe what you're missing is vibrational faith, real faith, faith that you feel. The mind may say, "I believe," but the body gives it away. Body language, breathing, the way you talk about your dreams. Everything reveals whether you're vibrating faith or just trying to convince yourself. Faith has a sound, a texture, a presence. It's not noisy, but it's firm. It doesn't need applause, but it sustains itself. It doesn't feed on proof, but on vision. When you start to cultivate this living faith, something changes. Not outside, but inside. And it's this inner change that starts to rewrite your reality, cell by cell, choice by choice. Because true faith is not wishful thinking. It's a vibrational choice, an energetic stance, a state of being that doesn't depend on anyone to keep it standing. Beware of borrowed faith. It does not sustain your mission. Often, without realizing it, we place our hope on someone else's shoulders. We follow the faith of our parents, the enthusiasm of a mentor, the certainty of a friend. We repeat words that are not born of our silence. We act based on convictions that we do not put into our bodies. And therein lies the invisible danger, living with borrowed faith. A faith that inspires on the outside, but does not sustain on the inside. A faith that works for others, but that has no roots in your emotional soil. This faith may even move you for a while, but it does not sustain you when the wind blows hard. It does not anchor you when everything seems uncertain. True faith cannot be outsourced. It needs to be cultivated within. It needs to be born from within, even when everyone around you doubts you, even when the world gives you reasons to give up. The conviction that moves mountains is not the one you hear, but the one you feel. It is the one that no one needs to confirm, the one that remains alive, even when no one else believes. It's easy to lean on the faith of others when things are going well. It's hard to keep your own flame burning when everything around you is silent. And it's not about pride, it's about vibrational identity. When you try to walk with the faith of others, you lose touch with your own frequency. You start to distance yourself from yourself. You disconnect from the voice that only speaks when there is internal silence. The mission you carry, the calling that beats within you, cannot be sustained by other people's words. It needs to be fueled by an inner certainty, a decision to move forward even without a map, even without guarantees, even without company. Borrowed faith is like walking in shoes that don't fit. It may seem comfortable at first, but over time, it hurts. It bothers. It makes you tired. The only faith that sustains your mission is the one you build with your own hands, even when they're shaking, with your own voice, even when you're insecure, with your own pain, even without answers. Because living faith is born from the journey. It doesn't come ready-made. It is forged along the way, in the stumbles, in solitude. It is honed when you choose to believe in the invisible, even when everything screams otherwise. And at that moment, when your faith stops being a reflection and becomes an origin, you become unshakable, because it is no longer the world that tells you what to believe. It is you who chooses to vibrate what you want to manifest, and this vibration, yes, sustains empires. It sustains missions. It sustains souls that do not bow down to fear, because now your faith has roots. It has a body. It has a name, and that name is you. Why discipline without faith becomes emotional torture. Discipline is a revered virtue. It organizes, structures, and creates constancy. But when disconnected from faith, it becomes a burden, a continuous effort that demands but does not inspire, a routine that repeats but does not transform. Without faith, discipline becomes a prison, a cycle of obligations that generates no meaning or true progress. Because what drives discipline in a healthy way is not rigidity, but the living intention behind the effort. And this intention only has strength when there is faith. Faith is what gives soul to the habit. It is what gives purpose to the repeated gesture. It is what makes getting up early, persisting, saying no to distractions, taste like a mission and not a punishment. When you act with faith, even pain has a deeper meaning. But without faith, everything is more tiring, everything that weighs more, because the body is moving, but the heart is absent. The soul does not see itself in what is being done, and little by little, you become disconnected from yourself, even while maintaining the external commitment. There are many people who are stuck in exhausting routines not because they lack ability, but because they lack a vibrational connection with what they do. They continue because they should, not because they feel, and this generates a silent erosion in motivation. Joy disappears, enthusiasm dissolves, discipline becomes sacrifice, and the result is exhaustion that comes not only from physical fatigue, but from a disconnection from one's own essence. Action loses its soul, and the soul, without room to breathe, begins to silence. But when discipline is born of faith, everything changes. Consistency becomes an expression of certainty. Effort becomes a ritual. Each step gains depth. Each small victory is celebrated as part of a sacred path. Because now there is a living why behind the how. Faith puts energy into the invisible, and this energy vibrates in each concrete action. What seemed like just routine is now a conscious path. What seemed like obligation is now devotion. It's not about abandoning discipline. It's about filling discipline with faith, about remembering why you started, about feeling once again the vision that gave rise to the path. Because when the soul returns to inhabit the habit, the path ceases to be torture. It becomes a sacred crossing, movement with direction, effort with soul. Disciplining yourself, then, is no longer about punishing yourself. It is aligning yourself. It is getting closer to what already vibrates within you as real. It is acting with living intention, even when the results have not yet arrived. And that transforms everything. The invisible factor that transforms desire into certainty, the vibrational state of faith. Desire is human. Everyone desires. They desire change, healing, growth, love, recognition. Desire lights the spark. But what really transforms this desire into certainty is not the desire itself, but the internal state with which this desire vibrates. And this state has a name: faith. Not faith as a vague belief, but faith as a vibrational configuration of the being, an emotional frequency so aligned with the desired future that there is no room for doubt. There is only presence, and presence is certainty in silence. Emotional science today proves what the ancient masters already taught in subtle words. The brain does not distinguish a deeply rooted belief from objective reality. It responds to emotional repetition with the same strength with which it reacts to what is tangible. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity. Napoleon Hill called it faith. When you repeat a conviction with sufficient emotion, the brain begins to treat it as truth. And once something is treated as truth by the internal system, the body begins to act in coherence with that truth. Your eyes begin to see opportunities that were previously invisible. Your choices become bolder. Your personal magnetism changes. And everything starts to move toward what you already feel is right. But you need to understand, faith is not born from desire. Faith is born from the decision to vibrate as if your desire were already a reality. And this decision requires presence. It requires consistency. It is not repeating empty words. It is repeating with emotion, with intention, with dedication. It is not enough to think about what you want. You need to feel what you want as if it already is, as inevitable, as non-negotiable. Your entire body needs to enter this frequency. Your breathing, your gaze, your posture. Because faith is not a thought. It is an embodied vibration. And when this vibration stabilizes, something changes. Desire ceases to be a hope and becomes a silent certainty. There is no more rush. There is no more despair. There is a type of serenity that only those who have seen with their inner eyes can understand. It is as if time ceases to be an obstacle, as if the mind were saying, "I know it hasn't arrived yet, but my heart already lives there." And this already living there is what brings the future into the present. It is what reconfigures the field around us. Because the universe does not respond to your will, it responds to your vibration. It is in this state that the great invisible movements happen. It is in this state that desire finds its way to manifest itself, not by force, not by control, but by resonance. When you become energetically compatible with what you desire, there is no resistance enough to prevent its fulfillment, because the certainty is already installed. And this certainty changes everything. Faith as a frequency that is consistent with what is not yet seen. There is a huge difference between dreaming and being energetically aligned with what you dream. Dreaming is wishing. Aligning is living inside what has not yet materialized on the outside. And this coherence between what you feel and what you hope for is what transforms faith into a magnetic force. Greg Braden talks about the coherence between the heart and the brain, between feeling and intention. And this coherence is a vibrational bridge, a bridge between the invisible and the real, between internal vision and external manifestation. When we say that faith is a frequency, we are talking about a state of consciousness that stabilizes in an energetic pattern, a pattern that says, without words, that what you desire already is. It already exists. It already vibrates. Even if the eyes do not see it yet, the body feels it. The mind collaborates. Emotion sustains. Faith is the frequency of those who do not need proof to move forward, of those who do not demand guarantees to move forward. It is the vibration of someone who is already living the future, even if they are physically in the present. This state is not illusory, it is creative, because everything that manifests is first born in a field that cannot be seen. Reality is not a reflection of what you desire, but of what you vibrate. And the vibration of faith is one of the most powerful forces in this field. When you manage to stabilize your energy in this place of non-visual certainty, you change your vibrational signature. You begin to emit a clear message to the universe. I am already what I hope for. And this message, when coherent, begins to attract situations, people, and paths that resonate with it. What is not yet seen is not absence. It is merely temporary invisibility. And faith is the energetic code that translates the invisible into the possible. It is the inner sound of something that does not yet have a form, but already has a presence. When you feel what has not yet arrived as if it were already in your life, you anticipate reality. You shape it. You call it closer, not with anxiety, but with attunement, not with despair, but with tranquility. This is the secret that so many ignore. Many wait for reality to change so that they can feel differently. But those who understand the nature of faith know that it is necessary to feel differently for reality to change. Faith is the reversal of the common flow. It is the decision to live today as if tomorrow had already responded. It is the choice to vibrate with coherence even in the face of the invisible, because reality does not respond to the absence of faith. It waits for alignment, and when it arrives, the invisible begins, slowly, to become visible, because everything begins in frequency. Invisible error, using logic to decide what only faith can support. The logical mind has its value. It organizes, analyzes, compares. It calculates risks, plans routes, projects possibilities. But there are moments in life when logic becomes insufficient, when reason stumbles in the face of the invisible, when the mind screams no, while the soul whispers yes. And it is in these moments that many get stuck. They paralyze. They retreat, because they try to support the intangible with the foundations of the visible. They try to validate with arguments that which can only be supported by vibration. And this attempt, although well-intentioned, generates disconnection, because the heart speaks a language that the mind alone does not understand. When you try to decide the next step of your journey based only on logic, you ignore the most accurate compass you have: vibrational intuition, the silent feeling that something is right, even if everything seems uncertain. It is in this dissonance between logic and faith that many abort their own miracles, not because they were not possible, but because they have been questioned too much, rationalized until they lose their strength, dissolved in the wait for certainties that never come before the leap. The logical brain rejects what it cannot prove. It seeks known patterns, previous results, statistics. But faith operates in a territory where these maps do not work. It navigates internal seas where what counts is not proof, but resonance. It is not history, but internal impulse. And often what the mind calls madness is, in fact, a call from the soul, an invitation to live beyond logic, to trust without calculation, to follow without guarantees. This does not mean rejecting reason. It means putting it in the right place. Logic should serve faith, not command it. The mind should help build bridges, but the direction must come from inner vision, because it is vision, not the map, that reveals the destination. When you make decisions based only on what is visible, you limit yourself to what has already been experienced. But when you decide based on what vibrates within you, you expand the possibilities. Faith does not ask you to abandon reason. It only asks you to recognize that there is something greater than reason, something that pulses in silence. That does not need to be explained to be real. And it is this something greater that guides great transformations, because the extraordinary never reveals itself to those who demand proof in advance. It reveals itself to those who decide to trust, to those who sustain the vision even when logic tells them to stop, to those who honor the invisible as if it were tangible, because for faith, it already is. And when you start to act like this, something in your life begins to change. Not because everything became clear, but because even without seeing it, you began to follow. And that is where miracles are born. True story: the man who only prospered when he stopped asking for approval. For years, he tried to do everything right. He followed rules. He consulted experts. He sought opinions. Each step was thought through, reviewed, and validated by others. He wanted to grow, but he was afraid of making mistakes. He wanted to be recognized, but he hid behind other people's decisions. With each new idea, the question came back: will they approve it? It wasn't fear of failure. It was fear of not being accepted, of being judged for daring, for thinking differently, for following an intuition that no one else understood. And so his life became a series of cautious, controlled movements, shaped by the need for external permission. But one day, something changed. It wasn't a grand event. It was a silent decision, an internal tiredness, an exhaustion of living in the shadow of other people's expectations. He realized that he would never be free as long as he needed someone to say, "It's going to work out." And that's when he stopped. He stopped asking for approval. He stopped waiting for approval. He stopped consulting those who didn't understand the fire that burned within him. For the first time, he chose to trust his own vision, even without guarantees. And it was at that moment that something unexpected happened. The ideas began to flow more clearly. Opportunities arose where there had previously been closed doors. The energy changed. The outlook changed. The posture changed. Because now there was truth. There was faith. There was presence. It was no longer about pleasing. It was about living in coherence. It was no longer about following formulas. It was about following one's own frequency. And reality responded. Because the universe does not reward those who merely repeat the path of others. It responds to authentic vibration, to the courage to live an inner truth, even if it is not understood by everyone. This man discovered that prosperity is not a prize that one receives for pleasing the world. It is a natural consequence of living in alignment with who one is. When you exchange being accepted for being convinced, you stop going around in circles. You stop begging for attention and start emanating vibrational authority. Life doesn't wait for you to be allowed to be who you are. It waits for you to say yes to your own vision, and that yes, when it comes from within, has the power to change everything. Because true prosperity begins when you stop being a character in someone else's script and become the author of your own story, not with arrogance, but with faith. A faith that doesn't ask for approval, a faith that doesn't beg for recognition, a faith that is self-sufficient because it knows where it comes from and it knows where it's going. And that's prosperity in its purest form. Napoleon Hill's mental model. Faith is auto-suggestion converted into power. Napoleon Hill did not see faith as an unattainable mystical state. For him, faith was an outcome, a construct, a state of mind cultivated through conscious repetition. Auto-suggestion was the key, and not as a superficial technique of mental repetition, but as a deep process of impregnating the subconscious with a new vibrational identity. Hill claimed that by repeating with emotion what one desires, the subconscious mind begins to accept it as true, and by accepting it, it begins to act as if it were, and by acting as if it were, the external world begins to reorganize itself. This vision changes everything, because it takes us out of the passivity of belief and hope and invites us to reprogram and feel. Autosuggestion is not just about phrases. It is about consistent emotional states. It is about training the body to feel, even before there are external reasons for it. It is about rewriting what you think about yourself, about life, about what is possible, not with empty words, but with statements loaded with emotional energy. Emotion is what transforms suggestion into programming. It is what imprints a new reality on the subconscious. When you repeat to yourself day after day that you are worthy, capable, prosperous, loved, and you do so with inner truth, with emotional surrender, the brain begins to organize itself around this identity. It begins to build bridges so that this new frequency finds concrete expression. But if you just repeat for the sake of repeating, without presence, without emotion, without vibration, then nothing changes. Because the subconscious only responds to that which has true energy. And faith, in Hill's model, is exactly that. The emotional conviction that something already is, even without proof. This conviction is not born from logic. It is born from felt repetition, from internal practice, from the involvement of the body, of breathing, of intention. That is why Hill did not speak of faith as blind belief. He spoke of faith as internal training, as emotional muscle, something that is strengthened with practice, with intention, with persistence. He understood that power is not just in desire. It is in the ability to keep that desire alive within yourself with such force that the world around you begins to respond. Faith, then, is not waiting. It is affirming with your whole body. It is living in a state of certainty before any evidence emerges. It is autosuggestion that becomes power, because when you repeat with emotion, you are not just saying words. You are reconfiguring what is real to you, and what is real internally, sooner or later, finds an external form. This is the vibrational basis of success. This is the emotional alchemy that Hill deciphered, and that, when understood with the heart, has the power to rewrite destinies. The trap of performative spirituality. There is a delicate point on the path to self-knowledge where the search for transformation can become a new role, a new character. The person who says the right words, repeats mantras, participates in rituals, shares catchphrases, but inside still carries the same doubt, the same lack of connection, the same absence of felt faith. This performative spirituality is seductive because it offers a sense of movement, but in reality, it is often just vibrational staging, an attempt to appear awake without actually having awakened. True faith is not measured by how much you talk about it. It is measured by how much you feel its presence even when no one is looking, even when there is no applause, no likes, no approval. Performative spirituality lives on the outside. It needs to be validated. It needs to appear strong. Real faith lives on the inside. It grows in silence. It blooms in the darkness. It is like a root that goes deep before emerging on the surface. It does not need to be displayed, because it is. Repeating affirmations without emotional conviction is just mental theater. It's noise. It's tiredness. The mind can be trained to repeat words, but if the heart is not present, the subconscious does not respond, and the universe does not respond to language. It responds to vibration. True emotion is the password that opens the doors of manifestation. Without it, everything is superficial. It is form without strength. It is practice without presence. And nothing really changes. Many do everything right spiritually. They meditate, visualize, write intentions, but they do it in a hurry, with anxiety, with the expectation of immediate results. And this urgency sabotages faith. Because faith does not demand. Faith sustains. Faith does not run. Faith remains. When you disconnect from the genuine emotion of what you are doing, your practice becomes performance. And performance does not transform. It only momentarily alleviates the guilt of not living your truth. Spirituality is not about how many techniques you know. It is about how present you are when you practice. It is about the depth with which you feel, not the quantity of what you do. It is about the silence between the words, the space between actions, the pulse between intentions. That's where faith is born, and that's where it stays alive. When you start feeling again, without rushing, without showing, without proving, just feeling, the practice becomes real. And then, the transformation stops being a promise. It starts to happen, because finally, you stopped acting and started living. How dopamine sabotages your faith when you only pursue results. There is a silent cycle that traps many people, the constant search for immediate results. This urgency for quick achievements activates a powerful substance in the brain called dopamine. It is responsible for the feeling of pleasure, anticipation, and reward. Dopamine itself is not the enemy. It is part of our motivation system. But when you start to depend on it as the only source of stimulus, a distortion is created. You start to condition your emotional state to obtaining external results. And this sabotages your faith in a subtle but profound way. Faith does not live in urgency. Faith lives in permanence. When dopamine dominates, you exchange the serenity of the process for the anxiety of the next step. Everything becomes a goal. Everything becomes performance. And without realizing it, your energy begins to fluctuate based on what works or not. If something flows, you feel hopeful. If something stalls, you feel like you are falling. Faith, which should be a stable vibrational base, begins to be replaced by an emotional roller coaster. And this generates exhaustion, because the soul was not made to live on peaks. It needs depth, internal stability. This dynamic also transforms spiritual practice into a tool for reward. You meditate, expecting results. You visualize, expecting a return. You repeat affirmations, expecting signs. But true faith does not negotiate with time. It does not say, "I believe as long as it happens soon." It says, "I believe, even if it hasn't happened yet." When you exchange the natural flow of faith for the vicious cycle of dopamine, you lose touch with the present. You start living in the future, in a future that never arrives, because it is always conditioned by something outside of you. Real transformation happens when you slow down, when you learn to be present without demanding proof, when you allow yourself to feel pleasure in your own vibration of certainty and not just in the confirmation of results. It is in this place that faith is strengthened. It is in this space that it stops being a means and becomes a state, because true faith does not depend on external stimulus. It is nourished by its own alignment. It expands in silent repetition, in the seemingly simple daily life, in the daily surrender to what is not yet seen, but already felt. As long as you seek only peaks of pleasure, your faith will be unstable. But when you dive into the depth of purpose, your faith will be constant. And this constancy is what creates the reality you desire. Because the universe does not respond to momentary intensity. It responds to the frequency maintained. And maintaining a frequency requires presence, not haste. Certainty, not conditioning. Love for the process, not dependence on the result. In this space, dopamine calms down, and faith begins to reign. The metaphor of the blind archer. Without faith, your actions have no direction. Imagine an archer with perfect technique, precise breathing, impeccable posture, well-measured strength. He prepares the bow, pulls the string, aims, but he can't see the target. He's blind. Without vision, he shoots arrows into the wind. Some even touch something, but none of them hit where they should. This is the portrait of many lives today. People full of movement, but without vibrational direction. Apparently productive, but internally disconnected from what they are really seeking. And what they lack is not strength. What they lack is faith. Faith is the inner vision that points to the target. It is what gives meaning to action. It is what makes each movement have a direction. Without faith, every action is random. Every goal is fragile. Every search is scattered. No matter how hard you try, if inside you still have the feeling that it might not happen, that it might not work, that it might not be for you, the arrow won't hit. The energy is scattered. The focus is broken. And reality continues to reflect this imprecision. Many people keep busy so as not to hear the emptiness of doubt. They work more, study more, do more, but they act like the blind archer. They sometimes hit the target by chance, but they never feel like they are really moving forward. And this is tiring, because the body is struggling, but the spirit is lost, without direction, without meaning. And meaning only comes from faith, from the silent certainty that there is a destiny, that there is a vibrational response waiting for you to tune in. Faith does not eliminate effort, but it gives effort a reason. It aligns the gesture with the vision. It transforms action into mission, and mission into achievement. When you begin to clearly feel what you're creating, even before you see it, your energy becomes more refined, your focus adjusts, and reality begins to cooperate. Because now you have stopped shooting in the dark. Now you see with the eyes of faith. And this makes each step more accurate, each choice more aligned, each gesture more connected to the whole. The blind archer doesn't need more technique. He needs vision. And this vision doesn't come from outside. It is born within. It is born when you silence fear and listen to certainty. When you stop acting to please or prove something and start acting because you feel that you already are. At that point, faith becomes the target and the guide. It leads you. It reveals you. And what was once scattered now gains precision. Clear vibration. Firm path. Because finally, you stopped just acting and started aiming. The law of attraction begins with the energy of conviction, not empty visualization. There is a lot of talk about visualizing, seeing what you want in your mind, imagining it, drawing it with your mind, painting internal scenes. And yes, visualization is a powerful tool, but it does not create by itself. What manifests is not the mental image. It is the emotion associated with it. It is the vibration that image awakens in your body. Without living emotion, visualization is like trying to light a fire with wet paper. It doesn't catch, it doesn't heat, it doesn't transform. There are those who visualize every day, but without presence, without surrender, without emotional breathing. They repeat images with their mind, but their heart is absent. They are visualizing, but they are not believing. They are imagining, but they are not feeling. And this is where the law of attraction fails for so many, because it does not respond to what you think you want. It responds to what you vibrate as already being. Attraction begins when there is conviction, when the whole body is saying, "This is already mine," even if the world still says otherwise. Vibrational conviction is not taught in theory. It is cultivated. It is felt in silence. It is perceived in the details. It reveals itself when you no longer need to convince anyone, not even yourself. When the emotion behind the vision is so intense that there is no doubt. And this emotion is not born of effort. It is born of internal truth. From the intimate decision to live in coherence with what you desire, even without guarantees. Because what attracts is not the declared desire, it is the sustained frequency. And this changes everything. Because many people think they are applying the law of attraction, but in fact, they are just repeating phrases and images without connecting with them. And then they get frustrated. They feel deceived. They question their own ability, when, in fact, what was missing was not practice. It was vibration. It was conviction. It was living faith pulsating behind the visualization. When you unite image and emotion, a frequency is born. And this frequency is like a magnet. It begins to move the field around it. It begins to organize synchronicities. It begins to create paths. Because now the universe is not just listening to what you want. It is feeling what you are. And what you are, vibrationally, is what you attract. Therefore, more than imagining, feel. More than repeating, vibrate. More than wanting, embody. Because it is the vibrational conviction that starts the process of manifestation. It is the inner certainty that creates the space for the miracle to happen. And this certainty does not need to be explained. It just needs to be felt. Technique: how to build practical faith on 3 levels. Faith is not a gift reserved for a few. It is an accessible construct, an energy that can be cultivated with awareness. But for faith to become real, concrete, and operative, it needs to manifest itself on 3 levels. Levels that feed off each other. Levels that together form the foundation of an unshakable conviction. The first is the level of emotion. The second, of vibration. The third, of coherent action. Each of them is an essential pillar. Without one, the others lose strength. The first level is emotional conviction. It is the ability to feel, with authenticity, the reality that has not yet manifested, feeling as if it were now, as if it were already present. It is not about imagining, it is about experiencing. When you access this state, even for a few minutes a day, you are teaching your body a new truth. You are recording in your nervous system the sensation of the desired future as if it were present. And this reprograms your biology. It changes your hormones. It alters your posture. Because the body believes more in what it feels than in what it thinks. The second level is vibrational alignment. Here, you learn to stabilize the frequency you feel, to maintain that vibration even when the external world does not yet confirm it. This requires silence. It requires presence. It requires the courage to remain connected to the feeling of what already is, even when your eyes say that it is not yet. This is the point where many give up, because they still wait for guarantees. But vibrational faith does not negotiate with time. It is anchored in inner certainty. It maintains the harmony even in the absence of signs. And this constancy is what makes reality begin to take shape. The third level is coherent action. Faith without action becomes fantasy, and action without faith becomes tiredness. Coherent action is that which is born of frequency. That moves from what is already felt as real. It is acting as someone who already is, even before having it. It is making decisions that reflect the desired future, not the limitations of the present. When you align your daily practice with the emotional and vibrational state you want to sustain, the universe gets the message. You're not just saying what you want, you're living as if you already have it. These 3 levels, emotion, vibration, and action, form a complete creative field. They don't work in isolation. They intertwine, reinforce, and feed each other. When you feel truthfully, vibrate consistently, and act coherently, something starts to move. Not like magic, but as a vibrational consequence. And this consequence is what many call a miracle. But it's not a miracle. It's alignment. It's precision. It's faith in motion. Because faith is not an abstract belief. It's a daily choice to live with intention, a conscious practice of reprogramming your energy, a state of presence with that which you can't yet see, but which you can already feel. And when you understand this, you realize that faith doesn't need to be sought. It needs to be built. And this construction begins within. Wise silence can strengthen your faith more than repeating mantras. We live in an era of noise, constant stimuli, repeated words, recycled ideas. Amidst so much noise, many believe that to strengthen faith, one must speak more, affirm more, declare more. And although words have power, they only transform when they are born from a true inner space, when they are charged with presence, when they reflect a state of alignment. And for this to happen, one must first be silent. Silence is not absence. It is depth. It is where the soul breathes, where faith settles, where mental noise dissolves and presence emerges. It is in silence that you hear your true vibration, where you realize if you're repeating something out of conviction or out of fear, where you feel if faith is alive or just staged. And this listening changes everything, because faith is not sustained by automatic repetition. It is sustained by deep listening, in the conscious pause, in the space between one thought and another. When you are silent, you create space, and in this space, faith can manifest itself, not as a concept, but as a sensation, a subtle but firm sensation, a presence that does not need words, that does not shout, that simply is. Many try to convince the universe that they believe, but the universe already knows. It reads frequency, not speech, and silence reveals precisely what is really vibrating within you. Repeating mantras without presence is like lighting a candle in the wind. It goes out. But when you become silent, when you dive into yourself, when you sustain the feeling, then any word spoken from that moment on gains power. It gains substance. It gains truth. Because now it is born from silence. And silence, when inhabited, is a source of creation. It is a matrix of transformation. Deep faith does not speak all the time. It observes. It feels. It waits. It trusts. Not because it needs to be convinced, but because it is already convinced. This faith does not need to be proven. It does not need to be reaffirmed every moment. It remains. And it remains because it has found fertile soil in silence, soil where there is no rush, where there is no pressure, where there is no mask. It is in silence that you recognize yourself. And when you recognize yourself, you reconnect with your strength, with your essence, with your certainty. Silence is often more transformative than any words, because in it, you no longer need to explain. You just feel, and when you feel, you remember. And when you remember, you trust again, the hidden enemy, faith fragmented by multiple distractions. Modern life has taught us to live with our attention divided. We jump from task to task, from thought to thought, from stimulus to stimulus. Everything is urgent. Everything demands a response. And in this incessant flow, something essential is lost: the ability to sustain a single frequency. Faith, to stay alive, needs focus. It needs presence. It needs a clean inner field where energy is not constantly diverted. When your attention is fragmented, your faith fragments along with it. Faith is not a constant effort of concentration. It is a deep surrender to a vision. But for this vision to take hold, the inner space needs to be unobstructed. Clarity is a form of energy, one of the most powerful, because when you have clarity, your vibration aligns, your actions become organized, your emotions stabilize. But when there is distraction, there is dispersion. And where there is dispersion, there is no manifestation. Every time you change your intention, every time you doubt a little, every time you let yourself be carried away by stimuli that do not honor your purpose, A part of your energy is undone, and even without realizing it, your faith is diluted. It does not disappear all at once. It fades away little by little, like a flame that weakens because the wind never stops. Constant distraction does not allow faith to mature. It prevents the vibration from deepening, and without depth, there is no root. And without root, there is no fruit. Therefore, cultivating faith also means learning to say no. No to excess information, no to comparison, no to the addiction to immediacy. It is learning to withdraw so that you can listen to yourself, to be silent so that you can feel. Commit to one vision, not all at once, because the universe responds to coherence, and coherence demands focus. When your energy is entirely in one direction, you create a magnetic field around you, a field that attracts, sustains, and accomplishes. This does not mean that you need to live in isolation. It means that there is a center within you, and this center needs to be protected. It is from this center that your faith emanates. It is in this center that your certainty is anchored. And the more you respect this center, the stronger your energy becomes. The more your vision becomes stable, and the more your faith transforms into coherent action. Because now you are no longer a passenger in the chaos, and you are once again a creator of your own frequency. Neville Goddard and the Power of Imagination with Living Faith. Neville Goddard did not teach imagination as a form of escape. He taught imagination as a spiritual practice, as a form of conscious creation of reality. For him, imagination was the very field of manifestation, the place where faith became flesh, form, life. But there was one condition. This imagination needed to be charged with conviction. It needed to be impregnated with real emotion, because according to Goddard, imagination without feeling is stereotypical. It is like a seed that does not find fertile soil. What he proposed was a profound reconfiguration of identity. You should not just visualize something as a desire. You should see yourself as someone who already lives it, who already is it, who already feels it as true. This fusion between internal image and emotion creates a specific vibrational state, a state that begins to reconfigure not only your perception, but your energy field. And when this field changes, everything around you begins to respond differently. Neville said, "Feel the desire fulfilled. Don't just think about it. Feel it as if it were now, as if it were real, as if there was no more waiting." And this practice was not passive. It was active. It was repeated. It was lived with intensity. Because imagination, when used with living faith, becomes creative prayer, a silent dialogue between your being and the universe, a code that does not use words but vibration. It is in this space of felt imagination that faith expands, because you begin to experience the future within the present. You begin to experience the invisible as familiar. And this internal familiarity is what makes the new possible. What seemed distant begins to seem inevitable. What seemed improbable begins to become natural, not because the world has changed, but because your vibration has changed. Goddard did not teach how to dream. He taught how to assume the state of already being, to live as someone who already has, to feel as someone who has already arrived. And this assumption is the point where faith crystallizes, where intention ceases to be an attempt and becomes creation. When you imagine with presence, with feeling, with surrender, you are doing more than dreaming. You are redesigning your reality from within. And this reality, sooner or later, finds a way to manifest itself. Because now, you are already there. Why many fail when trying to control the time of faith? Time for the human mind is an obsession. We measure progress by dates. We count victories by deadlines. And almost always, we associate value with speed. The faster, the better. The more immediate, the more effective. But faith does not operate in this logic. Faith lives in another time, a time that is not subject to the clock, nor to expectations, a time that follows the rhythm of the soul, not the calendar. And it is precisely this difference in pace that leads many to fail, not for lack of faith, but for trying to control when it should flourish. Faith is not urgency. Faith is presence with continuous vision. It is a state of vibrational tranquility that remains, even when external time does not seem to cooperate. When you try to rush manifestation, you are in fact vibrating scarcity. It is saying, even if, silently, it is not enough yet, it is not real yet. And this frequency interrupts the flow, because anxiety does not create. It contracts. It blocks. It prevents the field of possibilities from remaining open. The attempt to control time is born of fear. Fear that it will never come. Fear that it is not for you. Fear of having believed in vain. But faith does not need to protect itself from time. It transcends it. When faith is alive, time is not an obstacle. It becomes an invisible ally. Because now you are no longer racing against time. You are walking with it in harmony, in tune, in trust. And when this trust is established, something changes. Waiting ceases to be suffering. It becomes preparation. It becomes maturation. It becomes internal polishing to receive what is already yours by vibrational right. And this change in perception transforms everything, because you stop measuring your faith by immediate results, and you begin to recognize the subtle signs, the invisible movements, the silent adjustments that are happening in the field of reality. Even if they are not yet visible. Many fail not because they have given up on faith, but because they have put a deadline on it. They have conditioned their belief to speed, and in doing so, they have weakened their energy, because true faith does not negotiate with time. It is constant, it is calm, it is profound. And when you learn to rest in certainty, even without the clock confirming it, you activate a new level of creation. A level where time ceases to be a tyrant and becomes a witness to your constancy. And it is this constancy that one day reveals itself as fulfillment, not in the time of the mind, but in the exact time of vibration, the journal of certainty. Not all faith practices need to be grandiose. Some of the most transformative are simple, discreet, almost silent. One of them is the daily act of writing, but not writing desires. Writing certainties, writing what within you already is, even if it doesn't yet have a form, even if it doesn't yet have a name. The act of writing is a gesture of vibrational anchoring. When you write something with feeling, you are not just recording it. You are encoding a new identity. You are activating a new field. You are saying to the universe and to yourself, this is already mine. The journal of certainty is not a list of goals. It is a space for vibrational reprogramming, a place where you affirm what you believe with your entire body. It doesn't matter if the world doesn't see it yet. What matters is that you see it, that you feel it, that you honor that reality with words that come from the heart. Writing, in this context, is not a task. It is a ritual, a moment of encounter with yourself, a pause to remember, to reaffirm, to strengthen what is already pulsating inside. When you write down every day everything that you feel is right, even without external proof, you are in fact training your reticular system, this part of the brain that filters stimuli based on what you consider important. When you reaffirm your certainties, your mind begins to find paths. It begins to notice synchronicities. It begins to select opportunities that were hidden by doubt. And little by little, the invisible begins to show itself. This exercise is not about magic. It is about focus. It is about commitment to a frequency. It is about making faith a practice, not just an idea. The Certainty Journal is a bridge between what you feel and what you create. It is a daily reminder of who you are becoming. It is a vibrational mirror where you recognize yourself before the world recognizes you. And this anticipation is what moves the field. It is what opens the paths. It is what accelerates the invisible. Over time, you no longer write to believe. You write because you already believe, because you already know, because you already vibrate. And at that moment, writing stops being an affirmation, and it becomes confirmation, a seal of alignment, a way of saying, I remember, I already am, I trust. And this silent trust, cultivated page after page, becomes the fertile soil where the new flourishes, where faith becomes form, where certainty becomes reality. how faith redefines failures as invisible stages of refinement. At some point along the way, everyone faces something that seems like a failure, a detour, a loss, a silence that hurts. And when these moments come, the mind tries to understand, classify, rationalize. It searches for the reason, the error, the flaw. But there is another perspective, one that only reveals itself when faith is present, because faith has the power to rewrite the meaning of what we call failure. It transforms a fall into preparation, a mistake into refinement, waiting into alignment. When we look at life only through the eyes of logic, everything that doesn't work out seems like a loss. It seems like wasted time. But faith operates on another plane. It sees what is being shaped behind what didn't materialize. It sees what is being refined inside, while on the outside, nothing happens. Every no, every obstacle, every pause is, in fact, a field of vibrational adjustment, an opportunity to realign frequency, to review intentions, to deepen convictions. Faith does not deny the pain of what did not work out, but it offers meaning. It shows that what seems like an end is sometimes just a curveball, that what seems like rejection is sometimes protection, that what seems like a delay is sometimes preparation. And this perspective changes everything, because now you no longer live trapped in the idea that it was only worth it if it worked out. You begin to recognize the value of each step, even the silent ones, even the ones that hurt, even the ones you still don't fully understand. This perspective is not passive, it is active. It requires emotional maturity. It requires courage to remain confident when everything says otherwise. It requires humility to understand that there is wisdom that only time reveals. And this trust in the invisible is not an escape, it is awareness. It is presence. It is faith applied as a transformative force. When you begin to look at your failures with the eyes of faith, something heals. You stop carrying weight. You stop punishing yourself. You stop comparing yourself. And you begin to understand that each step had a reason, that each silence had a function, that each pain had a purpose. Not because suffering is necessary, but because it can be reinterpreted. It can be transformed into fertile soil. It can be used as a basis for something more aligned. And this is how faith brings you back to the path, not as someone who ignores what you have been through, but as someone who now understands, as someone who honors what you have learned, as someone who walks not despite your falls, but because of them, because true gold only shines after being polished. And you are being refined, not to be perfect, but to be true. And that in itself is already a miracle in motion. The difference between trust and hope. Faith is a state, not a plan B. Waiting is often confused with having faith, but there is a profound difference between those who wait and those who trust. Waiting can be passive, a state of suspension, a wait for something to come from outside that brings an answer, that resolves the issue. Waiting in itself does not generate internal movement. It can be filled with anxiety, a doubt, an expectation. And when time passes without signs, this wait turns into frustration. The energy cools, the heart becomes silent, and the soul grows tired. Trust is different. Trust is active. It is vibrational. It is a surrender with presence. It is not standing still. It is being planted. It is knowing that there are already roots, even if you do not yet see fruit. Trust is being with your whole body, in certainty, even when nothing confirms it. It is keeping your gaze on the inner vision, even when the world still shows the opposite. Trust does not wear out with time. It grows stronger because it does not depend on what happens. It depends on what you choose to sustain. Faith is not the last resort. It is not the plan B for when all else fails. Faith is the foundation. It is the origin. It is the field where everything is born. When you live faith as a state, you do not wait to act, to vibrate, to be thankful. You already act as someone who knows. You already vibrate as someone who possesses. You already thank as someone who receives. And this difference changes the field around you, because the universe does not respond to passive desire. It responds to active certainty, to the state of someone who is already in alignment with what they desire. When you wait, you place yourself on the sidelines. When you trust, you position yourself in the center. Waiting feeds doubt. Trust feeds vibration. And it is this vibration that attracts, that sustains, that manifests. Trusting is saying silently, "I am already what I hope to live." And by affirming this with presence, you stop being an observer and become a co-creator of your reality. The difference may seem subtle, but it is everything. It is the line that separates those who only dream from those who make it happen. Because what transforms is not what you want, it is what you vibrate. And faith, in its purest form, is this vibrational state where desire is no longer absence. It is already presence. It is already frequency. It is already you, even before it is, even before it comes, even before it happens. And that is trust. Faith is the element that transforms the ordinary vibration of thought, created by the finite mind of man, into its spiritual equivalent. Faith is the only agent through which the cosmic force of infinite intelligence can be harnessed and used by man. Napoleon Hill, in his book Think and Grow Rich, emphasizes that faith is the eternal elixir that gives life, power, and action to the impulse of thought. He states that faith is the starting point of all accumulation of wealth and the basis of all miracles and mysteries that cannot be analyzed by the rules of science. Faith, according to Hill, is a state of mind that can be induced by autosuggestion. He points out that it is a well-known fact that a person ends up believing what he repeats to himself, whether the statement is true or false. The repetition of dominant thoughts, mixed with emotions, constitutes the motivating forces that direct and control every movement, act, and deed of a person. Furthermore, Hill describes faith as the chief chemist of the mind. When faith is combined with the vibration of thought, the subconscious mind instantly captures the vibration, translates it into its spiritual equivalent, and transmits it to infinite intelligence, as in the case of prayer. Therefore, faith is not just a passive belief, but an active force that transforms thoughts into reality. It is through faith that burning desire is converted into its physical or monetary equivalent, becoming the starting point of all achievement. In short, faith, as presented by Napoleon Hill, is a powerful tool that, when combined with desire and autosuggestion, allows a person to influence their subconscious, connect with infinite intelligence, and transform their thoughts and desires into tangible reality. Faith is not a concept, it is an internal spiritual technology. Many still think of faith as a symbol, a pretty idea, an abstract belief, but Napoleon Hill saw it differently. He saw faith as a mental code, an internal mechanism, a spiritual technology that transforms thought into form, desire into reality, frequency into manifestation. It is not poetry, it is vibrational construction. It is consciousness engineering, a silent system that, when activated, connects you to what Hill called infinite intelligence, the field where everything already is, even before it is. This technology does not need complicated rituals. It needs presence, consistency, emotional alignment. Faith, as an active force, is the ignition point of all true creation. It is the master chemical, as Hill defined it, the invisible substance that gives life to mental impulses. When you combine faith with burning desire and conscious autosuggestion, you are not just waiting for a miracle, you are creating a miracle. Because now, your mental field is operating at a frequency where reality cannot ignore your intention. Faith is not about believing that something can happen. It is about living as if it has already happened. It is about embodying certainty to such an extent that any trace of doubt loses strength. This is not learned just from books. It is learned by living. It is learned by falling and getting up. It is learned by being silent and feeling. It is when the soul becomes still and the vibration stabilizes that this technology begins to operate in its fullness. And you feel it. You feel that something has changed. You feel that something has been activated. This activation is not noisy. It is subtle, but at the same time, it is radical. Because once your faith is real, the world around you begins to bend to your frequency. You no longer need to force it. You just need to sustain it. Sustain it with emotion, with vision, with vibrational integrity, and everything that once seemed distant begins to come closer. Because now you are no longer trying. You are operating. You are manifesting from a point where the invisible is already visible within. And when you understand this, you also understand that faith is not just a nice feeling for difficult days. It is the basis, the origin, the core. It is the silent tool that builds the invisible and transforms it into concrete. Not as magic, but as spiritual precision, as internal science, as an unshakable certainty that you are, with every choice, with every gesture, reprogramming your reality. Because now, you're using faith as technology, and that changes everything. According to Napoleon Hill, faith is the chemical element that, mixed with burning desire, creates the alchemy of success. There is a silent force that, when combined with true desire, transforms thoughts into realities. Hill called this force the chemical element of the mind, an accurate, almost scientific metaphor to describe the invisible process that occurs when faith and desire meet. When these two merge, there is no more hesitation. There is no longer a separation between wanting and doing. There is action. There is direction. There is a vibrational field so strong that everything around begins to reorganize itself. This alchemy does not happen by chance. It is activated when desire is not just a will, but a need of the soul. When wanting ceases to be a whim and becomes a mission. And when this desire is mixed with living faith, the kind that vibrates with emotion, with constancy, with vision, then what was once a dream becomes a project of the universe. Hill understood that success was not just effort. It was the result of the exact combination of intention and frequency between conscious mind and vibrational field. Faith, in this context, is not a random feeling. It is an essential ingredient. It is the invisible fire that heats desire until it becomes action, until it becomes matter. When faith is lacking, desire cools, energy disperses, intention dissolves. But when faith is present, desire burns. It burns in a serene but relentless way, a fire that does not consume, a fire that illuminates, that guides, that transforms. This internal alchemy is what moves people beyond statistics. It is what transforms ordinary trajectories into extraordinary stories, not because they knew more, but because they believed more. They believed before others. They believed when there was still no proof. They believed with such fervor that reality had no choice but to respond. And that is the turning point. When you stop asking the world to convince you, when you stop demanding signs, when you decide that your desire is real, that your faith is enough, that your energy is already at the point of combustion. At that moment, the alchemy begins. Not outside, inside. Because you become the laboratory of creation. You become the place where the invisible becomes visible. And that is true success. Not external achievement, but the vibrational coherence of someone who is already living what is still on the way. Of someone who already is, before being. Of someone who already manifests, while walking. W. Clement Stone said, "Have a positive mental attitude, but also have determined faith in what is not yet visible." Stone, a partner and direct disciple of Napoleon Hill, understood that positive thinking alone was not enough. He knew that simply maintaining good intentions was not enough to transform reality. A positive mental attitude is the ground, but determined faith is the seed. It is what defines what will blossom. It is the vibration that sustains the invisible until it becomes tangible. Determined faith is not intransigent. It is unshakable. It is gentle in form, but firm in its center. It does not fade with doubt. It does not give in to waiting. It does not get lost in time. This faith goes beyond believing that everything will work out. It is anchored in the certainty that something greater is already happening, even if the eyes cannot yet see it. It is the faith that remains, even in the face of silence, even in the face of the repetition of days, even when everything seems still, because this faith does not depend on external movement. It is the inner movement itself. It is the force that sustains presence, vision, and action, even in the midst of the invisible. And there is something profoundly liberating about this perspective, because instead of waiting for signs to believe, you start to vibrate your belief until the signs respond. You start to sustain the invisible with such intensity that reality begins to reconfigure itself, not as a favor, but as a consequence, because the universe responds to the vibrational state with precision. And when faith is determined, the surrounding field reorganizes itself. Stone reminds us that it is not enough to be optimistic. You have to be vibrationally committed. You have to maintain your inner posture, even when everything seems to contradict your vision. A positive mental attitude opens the door, but it is faith that goes through, that remains, that anchors. And this anchoring is what changes destinies, because a determined faith does not just desire. It already recognizes, it already honors, it already thanks, it already vibrates as if it were. And in this state, the impossible loses strength. Time loses control. Waiting loses meaning, because there is no longer any distance between you and what you desire. There is only presence. And this presence is, in itself, the anticipated realization. Because what determines the manifestation is not how much one wants. It is how much one vibrationally sustains what one has already chosen to live. And this sustainment is the essence of the faith that transforms, of the faith that accomplishes, of the faith that already is. The lack of faith is the true delay disguised as excessive planning. There is a type of paralysis that hides behind productivity, a postponement disguised as preparation, a wait disguised as strategy. These are those who plan, organize, analyze, but do not move, not because they do not know what to do, but because they do not feel firmly what they are building. The lack of faith, in these cases, is not a glaring emptiness. It is a subtle silence, a vibrational absence that, although not visible, affects each step. This excessive planning is often a defense mechanism, a way of not committing to the invisible, of avoiding the risk of believing without proof, of protecting oneself from the vulnerability that arises when one chooses to trust before seeing. But true faith requires exposure. It requires the courage to decide even without guarantees, to act based on a vision that cannot yet be confirmed. And this type of faith does not fit into spreadsheets. It does not follow schedules. It follows frequency. Planning has its place. It provides structure. It gives form. But when it becomes a refuge, it loses its value. It becomes a prison. It becomes an excuse. It becomes a disguised postponement. And then, what was supposed to be an impulse becomes a blockage. What was supposed to be a map becomes a maze. What was supposed to be clarity becomes confusion, not because the plan is bad, but because faith is absent, because the vibrational center of creation is deactivated. The absence of faith causes even the best strategies to fail, because the universe does not respond to the plan. It responds to the vibration with which the plan is sustained. It does not respond to what you want to avoid. It responds to what you are truly choosing to vibrate. And when that vibration is of doubt, of fear, of restraint, everything slows down, not as punishment, but as a reflex. That is why many talented people stay in the same place, because they are always trying to find the perfect plan. But there is no perfect plan. There is present faith. There is vibrational decision. There is sincere surrender to what is not yet seen. And when this surrender happens, planning makes sense again. It becomes a tool again, not a shield. It serves the vision, not hides its absence. Faith does not dispense with planning, but it precedes it, it guides it, it fills it. Because without it, any plan is just paper. But with it, even what was not planned falls into place. Because now, there is something greater guiding it, something deeper supporting it, something invisible that, even without form, is already a reality. And this reality begins within, with the decision to trust, with the choice to believe, with the presence of faith that does not wait for guarantees to move. It already knows. It already feels. It has already become a path. Faith requires an emotional decision to live in coherence with the invisible, without external guarantees. There comes a time in the journey when you need to choose. Choose to live based on what you feel and not on what you see. Choose to follow a vision that pulses within, even when the world does not yet confirm it. Choose to trust in a future that does not yet exist, except in your vibration. This choice is not intellectual. It is emotional. It is a surrender, a silent decision that changes everything. Because when you decide to live in coherence with the invisible, something in you aligns. Something in you becomes stronger. Something in you expands. It is no longer about proving, nor about convincing. It is about sustaining the frequency of those who already live what has not yet arrived. Sustaining the energy of those who already feel worthy, even without medals. Sustaining a steady gaze, even when the landscape seems empty. And this sustaining is what separates those who only wish from those who manifest. Not because they are special, but because they chose to believe before seeing. Faith is the bridge between what you believe and what you manifest. Not an idea, but a vibrational condition. This bridge is not built with effort. It is built with presence, with repeated conviction, with daily alignment. Faith is not something you have or don't have. It is something you cultivate, that you nurture, that you practice. It starts small, almost imperceptible, but if you take care of it, it grows, and it becomes part of your natural state, part of your way of existing in the world, part of your energetic signature. And when that happens, the world has no choice. It responds, because now you have become a bridge. You have become a channel. You have become a living manifestation of what you believe. Build faith like you build muscle, with exposure, repetition, and emotional awareness. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait for everything to be calm. Faith does not flourish in control. It flourishes in movement. It is born in the midst of doubt, but chooses to remain. It grows in the absence of signs, but continues to trust. And, over time, it becomes firm. It becomes soil. It becomes roots. And at that point, you no longer depend on the external to feel the internal. You vibrate by choice. You act with intention. You walk with clarity. The shortcut is not to avoid effort. It is to vibrate with precision while acting with intention. And that precision begins now, in the silence after these words, in the space between one thought and the next, in the breath that reminds you that you are alive, in this moment when you decide not to wait any longer, because now you know that faith does not need permission. It only needs presence. And that presence is where it all begins. It is where the invisible becomes possible, where frequency becomes form, where you become reality.